Welcome to Clocked In, the podcast where work works for people, not the other way around. We're Kristen and Ashley, and every week we dive into what's really going on in today's workplaces. From hybrid headaches to hiring trends, culture clashes to quiet quitting. Whether you're an HR pro, a people manager, or just someone trying to make sense of your 9 to 5, we've got the conversations that matter and the strategies to help you build a better workplace. So grab your coffee, clock in, and let's get to work. Welcome to this week's episode of Clocked In. I'm your host, Ashley.
And I'm Kristen.
And today we're going to be talking about, do you really just let them? So this is based on the book by Mel Robbins, The Let Them Theory, that came out in December 2024. And this idea is a mindset that's focused on reducing stress and people-pleasing and overthinking. And the core idea really boils down to, if someone wants to leave or judge you or exclude you or act a certain way, let them. And so the idea is that you should stop trying to control others, just recognizing that you can't control other people's opinions or actions or choices, so don't even waste your energy trying. Instead, you should focus on what you can control. Your own reactions, your own boundaries, your own goals. And that really there's this sort of freedom that comes from detachment. Full disclosure, I have not read the full book, but Kristen, I'm curious initially, what are your thoughts about let them? And do you really just let them in the workplace? Does this fit in the workplace today?
I have a lot of probably very strong feelings about this concept of just letting them, especially in the workplace. So I will give the caveat that I think that there is a lot of power in applying this let them theory to maybe like social situations, and we can dive into that. But when it specifically comes to work, I have some very strong opinions about it, but I think I'll just jump straight into our first article and then kind of talk about it because they cover a lot of key things here. And so the first article is from the Fast Company, and it's entitled Mel Robbins' Let Them Philosophy Doesn't Always Work in the Workplace. It says, here's when to use it and when not to. And so they give a very brief overview of the book, and they said, the core premise is simple yet powerful. Let them make their own choices, and most importantly, don't waste your energy trying to change others. And so they said at first glance, it seems very liberating because who wouldn't want to just give up that control and the weight of caring about what people think? But then they talk about, there definitely is like an appeal of just letting it go. But it's not always really applicable in the workplace. It's one thing, I think, especially in social situations or your personal life, where it applies is if let them is about relinquishing control about what we cannot change, then where does that leave the things that we can change? And so they kind of talk about when like let them just becomes an excuse to not behave appropriately or to not take your own responsibility for things because you're just letting people do whatever they want to do and you're not responsible for that. Certainly, in your personal life, depending on what you have going on, that's not always the case, but most certainly at work, you are responsible to other people. And sometimes you are responsible for other people. So this concept of just letting them do, whatever it is that they want to do and you're protecting your peace, so to speak, I don't think that flies. And then the article also calls out is that it's a luxury that not everyone can afford. So maybe depending on where you're at in your career, you can just let other people think what they want to think and you can let them do whatever they want to do and it's not going to impact you. But I'm thinking, and the article calls out as well, like depending on where you're at, if you're very young in your career or maybe you've switched careers or you're at a new company, this let them theory does not apply because what other people think about you actually matters a great deal. And we've talked about that in past episodes about like the perceptions that people have of you. They actually can really, even just the proximity of how closely you're working with them. And if they're seeing you, that can change their perception of you. And so you can't just let them think whatever it is that they want to think. And then that's okay. Like I said, I have a lot of very strong opinions about this, especially in the workplace. But based off that article, what are some of your initial thoughts?
I liked how the article called out that there are some things that are worth our time and effort. Like some battles are worth fighting. And so I think this is kind of where let them breaks down a little bit for me in the workplace, where, like you said, some people's opinions does actually matter. It will have an impact on your career. So you need to be like standing up for yourself, not be a doormat, but at the same time, you don't have to let someone else's attitude or actions like totally derail you. And that's where I think the balance comes in. So I can let you think what you want about me if you don't necessarily impact my career. Like, you can have a wrong opinion about me and I don't have to set the record straight. Or I can confront that and I can do it in a way that I am not just reacting and overreacting and getting all worked up and emotionally bent out of shape about it. And so there's the opportunity to do both. You can stand up for yourself and do it in a way that's like emotionally regulated. The real danger in letting them, I think, is that you can't just detach yourself from it, right? Like, when you decide something's worth your energy, you go all in, as this author says. Like, it's okay to do that. And that's why I think let them kind of fall short in the workplace a little bit, because it does matter. And there's a way to handle yourself that's emotionally regulated, standing up for yourself, but also recognizing that some people might have a wrong opinion of you. And I think too, one thing you and I have talked about a lot is just like, what's the difference between office politics? So maybe you get your feelings hurt because you get left out from a lunch invitation or something like that, versus where's the line towards something like discrimination or harassment. And so if someone is engaged in discrimination, they shouldn't be allowed to just let it go, right? Like, if they want to be discriminatory, just let them. Like, no, we wouldn't say that. And so you can't just let them do whatever it is that they want to do or behave however it is that they want to behave. And I think this is especially important to call out in relationships where there's a power imbalance. So like a manager and employees. If a manager is unfairly targeting an employee, then applying this let them could mean that that employee has a difficult work environment, lost work opportunities. They could face burnout or other sorts of like mental health issues. They could have their career damaged. Like, there's so many ripple effects that can happen in that workplace environment. And so just thinking about how if you just shrug your shoulders and let them, like, to protect your peace, as the saying goes, then it's like, but are you actually harming yourself in the long run by doing that?
Yeah, I agree. And I would have to imagine that when she wrote this book, she wasn't thinking necessarily about those types of scenarios, like you're just letting people do like illegal things, like the harassment and discrimination. But I think he really calls out kind of the danger of this mentality of just letting them, because if you go overboard with it, then you may excuse some behaviors that you should not be excusing. And I think that would apply both on a personal and professional level. And so I have some other thoughts, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, because I think the video that we have kind of addresses some of those.
Okay. I'm going to pull up this Instagram video. Okay.
Mel, where I want to start is work has been seen as the number one cause of stress. You write about this in the book, in people's lives. How can the let them theory help people in the place that causes them the most stress?
It's an excellent question. So first, let me explain the theory. The theory is very simple. It is a mindset tool that instantly helps you identify what's in your control and what's not in your control. The reason why this is important is because any psychologist will tell you that if you focus and try to manage things that are never going to be within your control, it only creates stress, anxiety, and frustration for you. When you take the context of work, there is so much inside your day-to-day life at work that is irritating, it is stressful, it is annoying, from the endless meetings and no time to get work done, to if you're somebody that is working in a retail store, you're doing shift work, you don't have control over what shifts you get, to feeling like you don't have the chance for promotion. It is just endless. And the way that you're going to use the let them theory is anytime something is happening at work that stresses you out, you have a customer that's really rude, you lose a big account, you get passed over for something, your idea gets dismissed in a work meeting. As you notice the stress come up, Jay, you're simply going to say, let them. Let my boss be in a bad mood. Let my colleague take credit. Let the customer be rude to me. And here's the thing. This sounds almost like you're being a doormat and you're being passive. It's the exact opposite. When you say let them, you're recognizing that the situation right now that has just happened has already happened, and that there is no reason to allow it to stress you out. When you allow your boss's mood to stress you out or make you nervous, you're giving power to your boss that they do not deserve. And so you're going to say, let them. When you allow a customer that is rude or inconsiderate to make you feel bad about yourself or to make you upset or to rattle you, you just gave this rude person power over you. When you say, let them, something interesting happens. First of all, you detach. Second, you feel almost superior. It's this weird thing because I don't think this is the same thing as saying, let it go. You're a very grounded person, Jay. You strike me as the kind of person that can let anything go. Me, whenever somebody would say to me, Mel, I know, it's not fair what just happened at work. You got to let it go. I'd be like, but I feel like I lost. I feel like I now have to be defeated. I feel more like a doormat if somebody tells me to let something go.
What's the difference between let it go and let them?
For me, when I say let them, I get a jolt of superiority because I'm like, I can see that my boss is kind of a jerk and I'm just going to let them be a jerk. And I rise above it and I feel a little judgy. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, this is why people get this tattooed on their bodies. Because when you say the word let them or you see it on your arm, what happens is you no longer allowed a rude colleague or something frustrating at work to derail your day. You say let them and you rise above it and you kind of go, I see what's happening here. I'm going to allow this without allowing it. But then there's a second part, Jay, and this is the most important part. And it's the part that people do not tattoo on themselves because it's the harder part. And the second part to this theory is saying to yourself, let me. Let me remind myself that in life, there are always three things I can control. That's where my power is. My power is not in managing my boss or in trying to deal with some customer that just doesn't want to be in an okay mood and doesn't want to be calmed down. They want to be right. They want to take it out on you. So you're going to let them. But then you've created this boundary. You rise above. I'm going to just let you be upset here. I'm not going to let it impact me. And then you say, let me. And what you're reminding yourself of is there's three things in your control, Jay. What you think, next. What you do or don't do. And oftentimes not doing something is the more powerful mood. And how you process your emotions. Those are the three things that are always in your control. And when you say, let me take responsibility right now for how I'm going to respond to this. And the word responsibility, after all, is the ability to respond, right? And so when you say, let me, and you remember, I can think what I want about this, I can act in response to this, and I can process my emotions and either allow them to rise and fall and stay steady and calm, or, you can certainly erupt if you want to, but why would you want to? Because then that means you've given power to somebody else.
All right, so what do you think, Kristen? Are you going to let someone take credit for your ideas? You're just going to let them?
Oh my gosh. So I think she calls out, honestly, kind of the problem with this whole let them theory. And that is there is a hyper focus on the just let them. And again, there is a lot of strength or validity in just being able to let things go and not let it derail your whole attitude. So that's the part that I'm 100% behind, that I often find myself struggling with. If I have a confrontation with somebody or if somebody cuts me off, as I'm trying to get to work on time or something, I'll be fuming about it. And if you continue to let that build, then you'll turn around and snap at somebody else. And so there's power in letting them go and being that person was in a bad mood. I'm going to let them do whatever they want to do and I'm not going to let it impact me. But the problem, I think, is exactly what she said. People get the let them tattooed on their body. They don't get the let me tattooed on the body. And the let me is not the part of the book that is, hyped up. It's all the let them. It's this mindset of just not even letting it go, but being superior because you're going to let other people do whatever they want to do. And honestly, life does not work that way, especially in the workplace. I have worked with people who have adopted this mentality of my coworkers can have whatever opinion they want of me. It doesn't matter. When I go home, I don't think about it. And again, there's some strength in there's a lot that is right about that. But also, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, like, if your opinions don't pay my bills, then your opinions don't matter, or something like that. Well, when you're looking at a work context, their opinions do pay your bills. And so what your boss thinks about you, if they are in a bad mood, like how you respond to them, like that's the problem. Like you can let them do whatever they want to do, but like you said, if they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, you can't just continue to let them, because then you're working in a toxic environment. And how are you going to respond appropriately to that? But where I really started to cringe is when she was like, if your coworker just takes credit for your work that you do, that's not about being a doormat. You can just let them and then be like superior to them. Well, no, because your coworker is then going to get a promotion and get a raise, and you're not, and you're going to be wondering why. So you cannot let people just walk over you in the workplace. I think something like you mentioned earlier is like, in her book, she tries to call out the let me. How you respond is where it really becomes powerful, but you don't have to let them just do whatever they want to do and let it go. And like sometimes, like she called out, not responding is the best response. But I just wish that there was more emphasis and more hype, or equal hype, to the mindset of how do I respond versus react. So how do I take this let them mindset and turn it into a way to where I can now respond appropriately to people when conflict comes up in the workplace? Because to me, this is just like trying to dismiss all conflict and not deal with it.
I think people are quick to point out, like, does this person impact my career? And like, how much am I going to stand up for myself, or, whatever that it might be. But sometimes that's tricky in the workplace. Like, you don't always know who is going to impact your career. I mean, it's obvious with like your manager making promotion decisions, raises, bonuses, that sort of thing. But just because someone's currently a coworker doesn't mean that they'll always be a coworker. Right? Like they could promote up, or they could have opportunities on like a cross-functional team or something like that. Like you don't really know who will impact your career. And so to think about it just in terms of, well, if they don't pay my bills, then their opinion doesn't matter. And it's like, well, you don't know what that kind of ripple effect might be, especially with how mobile and transient people are these days in their careers. You may work with someone now and then work with them again at a different company, later down the line. And so I think there is value certainly in being able to control your emotions. And I think you and I both have worked with people that do not have that skill. Like they just, exactly what they're thinking. They're going to tell you, they're going to show you with their face, all the things. And so there is value in having emotionally regulated responses. That does not mean that you just let them. So the let me, I think, kind of might apply a little more in the workplace than the let them. Because I think about it, like even her example about the rude customer, and it's like, sure, you could let that ruin your day, or you could move on, but you also don't have to be on the receiving end of every disgruntled customer who's cussing you out and all of that. Like, who wants to be in that kind of work environment either, right? Like, even if you're just letting them, I think that could be a really difficult spot to be in. And sometimes it's like, no, people need to be called out and said, hey, that's inappropriate. Or when you can regain your composure, I'm happy to talk to you about this further. I just think that the ability to control our emotional responses is really powerful. And that's somewhere that let them could kind of be tweaked for the workplace in terms of looking at it more holistically, still being able to stand up for yourself, and having emotionally regulated responses that don't just derail you for the whole day or whole week over one bad encounter.
Yeah, and I think that's where the power of the let them, but it's also very interesting to me that they distinguish the let them and then letting it go. Because to me, the power in that mindset is being able to let it go when things are beyond your control, or maybe it's just a one-off situation, instead of letting it completely derail you and stress you out, like letting that go, But so it's interesting to me that they made like that as two very separate things, when really, to me, that's where the power of it comes. But the fact that that in the video, it was like, anytime you feel stressed, you can just adopt this let them mentality. Well, anytime you feel stressed, you can't just let people do whatever they want to do and then walk away from the situation. Like, you have to be able to address conflict appropriately. And as you were talking, one thing I was thinking about is, I know you and I will always have the conversation if something comes up, because it inevitably will, where someone does something that's not correct, or maybe they take credit for something that you're trying to do. And then you'll always say, do I need to be right in this situation? And there are times when, no, you don't need to be right. Even if you are right, you don't have to be right in that situation. And you can just let them do whatever it is that they need to do, and you can move on about your day. But there are times I'll ask myself that, and I'm like, you know what? I do need to be right in this situation. Like, the stakes are high enough, or it's important to me that in this case I am right. But then I think that's when the focus should shift to the let me. Like, how do I respond appropriate to this? So just because, take the coworker taking credit, for example. To me, that's not a let them scenario, but that also doesn't mean that when you're in the middle of the meeting, you have to, raise your hand and be like, actually, no, this person didn't do any of this. This is my project. Like, you can have that conversation either with that person directly, or follow up with your manager and say, hey, I just wanted to make it clear, like, what my role in this project was, just so you know. So then that way, the people who are making the influential decisions, which, as a side note, you mentioned something about this as well. You don't always know who is making those influential decisions. And sometimes the people without the manager titles are the most influential ones in the organization. So you can't just say, I'm going to let my manager do whatever they want, or I'm just going to not care what my coworker thinks, because your coworker could be honestly calling the shots. I have seen that happen on more than one occasion. But anyways, I think it's all going back to asking yourself, do I need to be right in this situation? And there will be times when, yes, you do need to be right, but then that's when the let me part comes in. Let me respond versus react. So, like I said at the beginning, I have very strong feelings about this, because at the face value, it seems great. But when you try to apply it to a work setting, or when people overly focus on just let them, anytime stress comes up, I'm going to let them do whatever they want to do, that is so dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah, because reputation management is important. Like, you're protecting your personal brand in the workplace in this example. And so, like, yes, there are times when you need to be right, in the sense of, like, you need to set the record straight. There's some things, like you said, totally agree, that it's like the truth will come out, or it's not that big of a deal, or whatever. And that is a balance of recognizing which category something falls into. Okay, like, is this the time that I really do need to set the record straight? And then how do I do that in a way that's still professional and still reflects well on me and the personal brand that I have and the professionalism that I want to portray? Because how you handle situations like that is very telling, I think. But yeah, definitely, I think let them cannot be universally applied in the workplace. There's a time and a place where you really do need to stand up for yourself or be right, that you really do need to set that record straight. So listeners, we want to know, are you on board with the let them theory at work? Do you just let them to protect your peace? Or are you more of a middle ground kind of person? Or do you feel like you're just the doormat? Let us know. So leave a comment down below. And that's it for today's episode. We thank you for joining us on the Clocked In podcast. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. If you loved the show, please leave a quick rating or review. It helps get the word out about the show. We're looking forward to expanding our reach and talking to even more people about workforce issues and trends that we're seeing pop up. Be sure to connect with us on Instagram or LinkedIn. But that's it for today. We're clocking out. See you next time.